What's up guys, I hope you're all well. Welcome back to yet another video on the channel, and first things first, there's a pretty big elephant in the room that we need to address. Yes, I've been gone for quite a while. I think the last video I uploaded was actually just before Christmas. It was the Christmas special, and yeah, whilst I'm not going to get too much into it because no one wants to hear me ramble on about my mental health problems for 30 minutes, yeah, I just wasn't feeling myself. I was in a bit of a rut after Christmas, and kind of one of the main things I'd always said about making videos on YouTube was that I was never going to make something if I didn't enjoy it, and I wasn't ever going to force myself to provide content or make content that's supposed to be enjoyable for me to make. So I took a little bit of a step back, but I'm fine, I'm okay now, and obviously I'm back filming videos. So without further ado, on that note, let's transition straight into the video. Alton Towers is one of my favourite theme parks in the UK. Pretty much anybody who knows me will know that it's my favourite out of the Merlin parks. Obviously I have kind of home park bias for Thorpe Park, but objectively Alton Towers is my favourite. I do love a bit of Alton Towers, and one of the main things that's always stuck out to me with Alton Towers as being genuinely fantastic is their hotels and their accommodation. Obviously this is something that Alton Towers has always been leagues ahead with. You know, Merlin has kind of bumped the other parks up a little bit with hotels over the years. Of course, you know, mainly the kind of one that followed Alton Towers with it was Legoland. You got a few of the Legoland hotels that started to get built. Obviously the Chessington hotels began ramping up a little bit as well, and the last one we have on the list still hasn't got a permanent hotel. It's Thorpe Park. That's a whole other video within itself. I'm not going to ramble about the Thorpe Park or the Thorpe Shark cabins or whatever they're named now. You know, that's for a completely separate video. But yeah, honouring the fact that this is one of my favourite theme parks, and also the fact that these hotels are some of my favourite theme park hotels, I thought I would do a top 3 Alton Towers hotels video, mainly just for fun, but also if there's anybody out there who's thinking about staying at Alton Towers, I'm hoping this will kind of give you guys a little bit of insight as to, you know, what the different hotels are good at and what I think is the kind of quintessential Alton Towers hotel experience. So yeah, if you do go on to enjoy the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and yeah, I can't think of anything else, so without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Okay then, so before we kind of get into the main meat and potatoes of this video, I do want to kind of go over a few honourable mentions. There's a few reasons why these are being classed as honourable mentions and not part of the list. First up is the CBeebies Land Hotel. For obvious reasons, I haven't stayed here, and I probably won't stay here for a very, very long time. But yeah, I didn't want to not mention it in this video because I do think if you have little kids that love CBeebies and you're taking them to Alton Towers, if you want to spend a little bit of extra money, because I do believe that it is one of the more expensive hotels, if you do want to do that, this experience will be absolutely fantastic. It is kind of, I would say, the best themed in terms of an IP, you know, that Merlin's done. I've watched a few videos to kind of research, and yeah, it looks like a fantastic hotel for kids specifically. So these other hotels I'm going to go over aren't going to be as kid focused, and will more be kind of family focused, which is kind of Alton Towers' target demographic with a lot of these hotels. You know, there's something for everybody to enjoy. But yeah, if you've got little kids specifically that love CBeebies, I think this is a surefire bet. If you're going to spend money on a hotel, I think this is definitely the one that they're going to make the most memories with. Next up is the stargazing pods. Now, I did kind of consider integrating this into the Enchanted Village part of this episode, but I didn't really think it fit perfectly because obviously it is technically a different type of accommodation to the Enchanted Village lodges. You know, it is of course what it says on the tin. They're stargazing pods. They are basically the pods you would get at a lot of campsites, which is again a really unique form of accommodation, but this isn't going to be for everybody, and because it kind of is just the accommodation on its own, the rest of it kind of goes along with the Enchanted Village stuff. I'm going to save most of that for the Enchanted Village section. However, I did want to mention it. It's not personally somewhere I would stay, but it is very bare bones, but for a good reason. It is a lot cheaper. So if you do want a really cheap and effective accommodation at Alton Towers, I think this would definitely be a very unique one. And of course, especially if you're planning on staying in this accommodation during the summer, it can provide, I would imagine, a really nice kind of summer outing. But personally, it's not something that I would stay in for over like 2 or 3 days. You know, if you're there for a couple of nights, I would more recommend staying in one of the hotels, or of course the Enchanted Village lodges. Okay then, so moving into number 3 on this list, we have the Enchanted Village. Now, I've literally just spoken about this, and yeah, this point onwards, pretty much all of these hotels I genuinely enjoy. I don't think there's a bad hotel at Alton Towers at all. I think all of the accommodation is pretty top tier, especially when you consider it to some of the other Merlin attractions. It's a fantastic piece of accommodation, and I think it offers a lot to families specifically. The only caveat I think with the Enchanted Village is the entertainment package. I don't think it's as strong as the Alton Towers Hotel and Splash Landings. I don't think it's terrible. I think, you know, it's a very unique concept, and I do genuinely love the aesthetic of the Enchanted Village. I've stayed there a couple of times, and I would say it's a worthy experience for what you pay for it. I think it's in the kind of mid-range when it comes to how much you're going to be paying for these hotels. You know, and as for the rooms themselves, they are kind of rooms. I keep just kind of wish-washing between describing them as hotels and also lodges. They're kind of a bit of both. Essentially, they act as hotel rooms. Once you kind of walk into the lodge, it is your standard kind of hotel room layout. However, obviously the aesthetic and the fact that you're kind of semi-detached from, you know, the other lodges around the area, it does make it feel a little bit like a lodge, but don't go into it expecting, of course, apartment style lodge. That's just not what they're gunning for here. And obviously a lot of you probably will already know that, but yeah, I'm putting this in number 3, plainly because I like the hotel, I like the rooms, I like everything to do with it. It just doesn't have as much to offer as the other 2 hotels on Park, which is kind of the reason why it's made its way to the bottom of the list. Okay then, so moving on to number 2. Now this will obviously kind of unveil which one I've got at number 1, because there are only 2 hotels left. And yeah, at number 2 I have the Alton Towers Hotel. This is of course the OG, and I have only just recently stayed in this hotel actually. Go check out the video on the channel. I've absolutely had a blast staying at the Alton Towers Hotel when I visited Alton Towers last October, or September, I can't remember. My memory's not serving me very well today. And yeah, I think it's a fantastic hotel. At this point, I could have easily swapped out Splash Landings or Alton Towers Hotel for the top spot. This just narrowly missed out on Splash Landings for a reason I'll go on to when I obviously talk about Splash Landings being number 1. But the main kind of draw for this, for me, for the Alton Towers Hotel, is the history side of things. You know, this was the first hotel to open at Alton Towers, and it really feels it in a charming way, not in a, oh, it's really old and run down, it feels like an old hotel. It feels very classic Alton Towers, which I really liked. It was one of my highlights, you know, of the trip last year. I really enjoyed staying in the Alton Towers Hotel. I think it has some fantastic themed rooms as well. That's also something I forgot to mention with the CBeebies Land Hotel. There are some fantastically themed rooms. You know, obviously CBeebies' themed rooms are more kind of catered to specific TV shows, whereas the Alton Towers Hotel themed rooms are more kind of just quirky sort of ideas and unique themes. Me and Tom, my friend, when we went over to Alton Towers last year, we stayed in the Arctic Explorer room. Arctic Explorer room, and that was a really fun concept. We got a little polar bear in there, and it's just a genuinely nice vibe in the Alton Towers Hotel. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I think it's an absolutely fantastic hotel. And another thing to mention with these hotels, of course, is that you can move between them, you know, and experience different things. So like I said earlier with the Enchanted Village stuff, yes, the entertainment package within the Enchanted Village itself isn't the best. You can of course go over to the Alton Towers Hotel, experience the entertainment there, or alternatively you can make your way over to Splash Landings and, you know, just soak up the atmosphere in the bar and kind of do different things. So there are options available to you there. With that being said, the Alton Towers entertainment package for the Alton Towers Hotel is absolutely fantastic. I was genuinely impressed with this when we went last year. It was one of them things when we stayed there, we kind of initially said, like, you know, we're going for Scarefest, we're probably going to be tired, we're not going to end up watching any of the entertainment. But the last night we actually did sit down kind of in the main entertainment area and just watch some entertainment, and it's something that I wasn't expecting to do but really enjoyed. They had a couple of vocalists up there, they were fantastic. They have quizzes, they also have obviously kid-centered shows that are kind of more for families, and it's just overall a really nice atmosphere. Now Splash Landings does also offer this, and they offer a very similar entertainment package, but I was just genuinely impressed with the Alton Alton Towers Hotel one. Kind of moving on from that, the whole entertainment area is just genuinely gorgeous. Like, I think the presentation in the Alton Towers Hotel is pretty much flawless. Only second to the Splash Landings Hotel, which again I'll get onto in a minute. It's not inherently from the outside very revealing that, you know, it's got a theme. It kind of looks like just a really nice, well presented hotel. You know, maybe a bit old school in terms of its architecture, but that is on purpose. And of course, as you head into the foyer, you get this just beautiful view, you know, looking down on Sir Algernon's flying machine, I believe it's called, and it is just a really great centerpiece in the middle of the hotel. You enter on the middle floor, so much like Splash Landings, it is a multi-tiered hotel, and as you enter through that middle floor, you know, you get a great look at the kind of top of the flying machine, and you get to look down, you have the entertainments area, you know, and it's just a fantastic layout that I think really utilizes the space as well as the theming in a really unique way. So yeah, I really couldn't fault the Alton Towers Hotel. I love the Explorer theme, you know, it really fits Alton Towers in my opinion, and you know, the fact that this was the original hotel to open, it really feels like that, like I said, you know, in a really charming way, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic hotel. If you kind of want to stay at the Alton Towers Hotel, I would recommend doing one of the themed rooms if you have the money. I think out of all of the hotels, these are the best themed rooms that I've seen. I'm pretty sure you can get the Moon Voyager ones that are really, really cool. Of course, I stayed in the Arctic Explorer room, but of course the standard hotel rooms are still really great, and obviously the beds across each of these hotels are pretty much the same. You know, it's just kind of what sort of flair you want, and yeah, I was really impressed with the Alton Towers Hotel. And on top of that, also you have a lovely outdoor seating area that me and Tom kind of chilled out in on the second night again. It is just a genuinely beautiful hotel, and like I said, it's out of all the hotels, it feels the one that's the most kind of fancy is probably not the word, but it feels like it would be a very nice hotel you would find, I don't know, outside of a theme park, which is always, you know, nice to have when you have a lot of these kind of overstimulating, really in your face, like blah, like, you know, all this sort of theming and quirky stuff. You know, sometimes that can get a bit overwhelming, but I think the Alton Towers Hotel balances it really well. Okay then, so that of course leaves our number one spot. Unsurprisingly, it is Splash Landings. This is my all-time favourite Alton Towers Hotel. Now, like I said, number two and number one here were extremely interchangeable. I kind of had to force myself to pick one because I do genuinely love both the Splash Landings and the Alton Towers Hotel equally. However, Splash Landings just has a little bit extra for me. This is kind of a special hotel for me. This was the hotel I always wanted to stay in when I was younger. You know, and of course, you can't talk about Splash Landings Hotel without talking about, of course, the massive centerpiece of the hotel, the water park itself. I think this is just absolutely fabulous. You know, again, Alton Towers absolutely smash out of the park the water feature outside of the hotel, and it's a really deceptive facade because from the outside it looks quite small, it looks quite, you know, quaint, you know, oh, this is going to be nice. You walk in and it just does open up into a really interesting layout, and that's more kind of because they had obviously the limitations with building the hotel. Much like a lot of the attractions at Alton Towers, they cannot build above tree level, so they actually kind of had to dig down with the Splash Landings Hotel. It is multi-tiered like the Alton Towers Hotel is, however you enter the Splash Landings Hotel on the very top floor instead of the middle, so your top floor is the kind of entryway with the reception. You know, there's a gorgeous kind of lighting package inside. You have the lovely kind of old school car that has the fish tank in the back. It's a really lovely welcoming vibe into the hotel, and it's really kind of a great first impression. You then move downwards into where you have Flambeau's Jambo. That is obviously the restaurant that the hotel houses. I think you can access a few of the rooms from the middle floor as well, and then the very bottom floor is the water park entrance itself. So it's a really interesting layout. You kind of start at the top, you work your way down. The other thing that I really want to emphasize about this hotel is just how fantastic you know, the views of the water park are. You can pretty much see the water park from, I'm almost certain the top two floors. The third or the bottom floor, I'm not entirely sure how much of the water park you can see. Obviously that is the entrance into the water park, but you do get some absolutely fabulous views of the water park from pretty much any communal space in the hotel, especially the bar at the top. These looks the best at night. Obviously, if you're chilling, watching the evening entertainment, all of the lights are normally on in the water park in terms of, you know, ambient light. It just looks absolutely phenomenal, and it is one of the best kind of vibes I think you can get at any of the Merlin hotels. And continue on vibes. it is just immaculate in here. I absolutely love it. Like, I'm a sucker for water and, you know, aqua parks and water parks in general, but it just feels really fun. You almost get a sense of chlorine when you walk into the hotel, just a little bit. You know, it reminds me, you know, when you used to go to, you know, the water parks and the swimming pools when you were younger, and it used to just be a really nostalgic feeling. And on top of that, you of course have some great theming features within the hotel, much like the kind of flying machine that you have within the Alton Towers Hotel. You have like the plum works or the plumbing works that kind of feature without the hotel, you know, starting with the big obviously entrance facade with the water feature outside there. You also kind of have like this really clever water fountain that runs from the top floor all the way down the spiral staircase down towards the bottom floor. I think that's absolutely fantastic, and it's just really visually interesting to look at. And the Caribbean vibes are absolutely immaculate. I love it. It just makes you feel like you're in summer, even if you were to visit in the winter. The themed rooms are kind of here nor there. I don't think there's actually that many in Splash Landings, but the actual kind of main standard rooms I think have a lot of character, and even some of them you do get a view of the outside portion of the water park, which is genuinely fantastic as well. You know, and I just think the overall cabana sort of theme works extremely well here. You know, the restaurants across each of the hotels I haven't really talked about because most of them are pretty standard Merlin restaurants. They're not really anything special, but I do just genuinely enjoy the bar area in Splash Landing slightly more than the Alton Towers Hotel, just purely A, for that view of the water park, and also just purely from the vibes themselves. You know, sitting up there with a cocktail. Well, I visited this hotel for the first time with my family, and it was just a genuinely lovely vibe. But I will crown Splash Landings as my favourite Alton Towers Hotel, and the one I would probably recommend to anybody who is looking for like a really unique hotel experience, because that is really what this offers. You know, the Alton Towers Hotel is a very standard hotel experience in the fact that, yeah, it's got some quirky theming here and there, you know, but overall the bar, the restaurant, it feels very normal and natural in a good way. Again, that's not a slight against the hotel. I think it's an extraordinary hotel in its own right, and it does have that kind of more mature feel to it. However, Splash Landings to me just embraces what I think a theme park hotel should be. You know, you have the uniqueness of the water park in the centre, you know, the really fun and unique theme, and I do think there is a lot to love for all ages in the Splash Landings Hotel, and again, what I would recommend to anybody out there who's looking for a very unique theme park hotel experience. So that is going to do it for today's video, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. Like I said, I'm hopefully here to stay now. I'm feeling much better, and yeah, hopefully nothing bad happens and I stay kind of on course. You know, and I did kind of want to open up about it a little bit at least, rather than just not tell you why I've been gone. You know, it's a very real thing, mental health, and you should take it very seriously. And obviously, whilst mine wasn't totally bad, I wasn't in a terrible position. You know, it was you know, something I needed to work on. And anybody out there who's feeling you know, down or depressed or anything, always reach out to somebody you know, even if it's very small like mine was. Mine wasn't astronomical, you know, I wouldn't say I was depressed, but if you are feeling sad or you're just not feeling yourself, definitely reach out to somebody. It always helps. And yeah, like I said, I'm glad that that's all behind me now, and I can kind of focus a little bit more on what I love doing, which is making videos for you guys. So without further ado, I am going to end the video there. I hope you guys have a brilliant rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.